All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lalo Land. My name is Chloe Pitkoff, and I'm a senior studio art major at Davidson College. And I'm so excited to have you here at my senior show. I would like to say a whole bunch of thank yous. First to Leah and Carter for being here, and to Cole for helping manage all of the questions, and to all of the gallery interns for helping me set up this whole thing. I truly could not have done this without you. So thank you so, so much. So love to thank Katie, Court, Joelle, and Tyler for all of your continued help and support over the past 4 years. I've learned so much from all of you, and I really appreciate all that you've done for me. And I'd also like to thank my parents. Hello, Mom and Dad, and Dachi Wachi. I hope you're out there too. And just all of the studio art majors, Landon, Adrian, Adele, Emily, Rebecca, and I would like to also recognize Isaac Sharbach, whose show will open next week. I helped curate that one as well, but we were very sad to lose Isaac, but so glad that we could present his work as well as part of these groups of exhibitions. So to start off, I would just like to sort of talk a little bit about what Lalo Land means and the title. So it all sort of began with Thatcher, who, hello Thatcher again, is my brother. He also attends Davidson. And we've just been together through our whole lives. And so when he was little, he couldn't say Chloe. So my nickname that he gave me was Lalo. And that led to, in elementary school, my first sort of self-portrait cartoon character named Lalo Schmidt, which I drew in all of these cartoons that my friends and I sold in the lunchroom. And all of my kindergarten class had a Lalo name. And it was this little adventure world that you entered into and figured out how to interpret being 5 or 6 years old through all these adventures and this alter ego character that we each had. And so this show, even though it's 15 years later, that idea of this alter ego and using self-portraiture to try to understand the current social turmoil and drastic historical events, but also very innately personal events in my life, feels very relevant to what Lalo Land still is. And I wanted to start off with this piece, which is called Lalo, because this was the first piece that I made in this whole series that is in this sort of style where facial expression, hairstyle, fashion, pattern, and color really create that environment. And so this is like, I made this one sophomore year, and it was the beginning of this style that I had done, and really using pose and expression to figure it out. But I hadn't really figured out as much of what I wanted to say with it as I had figured out a style using acrylic and acrylic paint pens, which I've used and sort of developed my skill in over the past 4 years. So after sophomore year, which was that first one, I went abroad to Morocco, where I studied migration and transnational identity. So I wasn't on an arts course, but sort of as a continued aspect of my liberal arts education, I was in these political science classes, and I had a host family and was really immersed in the culture of Morocco and got to travel around to Fez and Meknes, and we went to Chefchaouen, Morocco, which is the blue city up north, just for a day trip. And we wandered around and found this gallery called the Maya Gallery, where I met Yassir, who I think is here as well. Hello, Yassir. And I kept in touch with him in the time I was there. And I asked if I could come back and just sort of see his work again. And he said, oh, come back, we'll find you a house. Like, you can work in our gallery, you can work in our studio. So I spent the last month of independent study in Morocco working with Yassir and the other artists at the gallery. And this is one of 5 pieces I made in that last month that I was there. So this one is called Mo and Chloe. This is my friend, Simo, and that's me, Chloe, which is, again, continued self-portraiture. But because I was studying migration and transnational identity, I was really interested in the crossover of the 2 cultures. So that thought is expressed by the fact that our bodies are crossing over each other. And also, as I was there, surrounded by tons of color and pattern and just another language and just like the different smells and this whole different environment, the pattern that I had begun to develop sophomore year really started coming more to light here. And I figured out more how to use different symbolism as I was studying Andy Warhol and Hassan Hajjaj simultaneously as part of that cross-cultural study as well, and how logos and different symbolism in their work says so much. I was interested in exploring that in this piece as well. So we have the Campbell soup cans that Andy Warhol would use, but Hassan Hajjaj uses them to frame his photographic portraits. So I that there, but also Hassan Hajjaj uses Coca-Cola in both English and Arabic in his pieces, and I wanted to incorporate my use of language into the piece as well, also as its symbolism, and how the letters in Arabic are different from in English, and how logos can kind of make that more beautiful. And I also was interested in the fashion and crossing over the two cultures. So Mo, who is Moroccan, has a cowboy hat and denim and Converse, and I am wearing more traditional Moroccan garb. But these as well are the American flag and the Moroccan flag, which is red with a green star in the center. And then finally, the light in this piece comes from sort of the top center, and that was my homogenous to religion, which is a consistent theme in my work as well. I'm from an interfaith family. My mom is Episcopalian and my dad is Jewish. So I sort of came to Morocco with the knowledge of both of those religions, but really got to explore Islam and its role in the entire community of Morocco there. So my use of light there is how we all have the same God and are under the same light. So that was this piece. And then I came back and I lived in the sustainability co-op, which is this piece over here. So I lived in the sustainability co-op at Davidson, which is a group of 10 students that are committed to a lifestyle of sustainability and environmentally friendly practices. So I entered in the second semester, since I had been abroad in Morocco the first semester, and entered into this pre-established community that had so much energy and was just such an incredible group of people to get to live with. So thank you all. I know some of you are out there, and it was really amazing to get to live with you for the short time that we did have together, because COVID came several months into it. But in the time that we did have, I made this piece. And part of the practice of being a member at the house is that every week we have a weekly community dinner. So that's one aspect of this. The other thing is that, as we're called the sustainability co-op, that gets shortened to coop, and so the chicken is our mascot as part of the chicken coop. So as I had explored how to use symbolism more in Morocco, I then went into this piece with tons of chicken symbolism. And going with the idea of the chicken and also the dinner, this is my version of the Last Supper, which again has that religious reference. So here we have Chicken Jesus, because there's 11 people in the house, counting the person whose room that I had taken, which is Kathy. And so that's sort of the 12th figure there. And the supper is Chick-fil-A. Oh no, like it's so unsustainable. And Margot is going crazy because that's terrible. But we also have all these other chicken references happening. So there's in the recycling symbol on Sansri's shirt, there's like which came first, the chicken or the egg. There's chickens in the rug pattern down here. We have chicken feet. There's Victorian wallpaper patterns with birds in it. There's eggs sort of falling from the ceiling there. And then also mixed in are just sort of other joke kind of references that happen in the house. So Yashita had a whole incident with a skateboard. Pearson Worth went as Harris and Teeter for Halloween, which is the grocery store in Davidson. Working in all of these stories through pose, but also color and pattern, and developing those persistent themes in my pieces. And then, so I had, depicted this incredible community, but had to end up bringing this piece home with me. And so this was like my living room floor all summer. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for letting me do that, because everyone was stepping around it all the time, and it's pretty big. So I really appreciate you giving me the space to do that. But because working on some small things, so I wasn't taking up the entire house. So that leads me to these pieces over here. Oh, also this piece is called Sup, which is sort of an homage to The Last Supper as well. But these pieces are all part of my isolation series. So I went home, and in each of the first 4 weeks of being there, I made one of these pieces. I got home and I was sort of blocked from education, and I had left the place of education where I was studying, but I also didn't really know what to say about COVID yet and what was happening and how I could work it into my work or what I wanted to say. So that's what this piece ended up being. And then the second week, Thatcher and I were home, so I knew I was going to be back there with Thatcher, and we were surrounded by all of these colors and patterns of our house. So these patterns are taken from different rugs in our house and blankets. And also that's when masking sort of started happening. So masks weren't such a thing yet in the first week when we were home because nobody knew what was going on. But this is when we sort of started wearing bandanas and not the more official masks. And that happened more 3 weeks in. And this is sort of when it really set in what was happening and that I was going to be, just the gravity of that started setting in. So there's much more muted colors in this piece because of that. And then this fourth final one is when I realized that in Mo and Chloe, I had masked myself. And even though COVID wasn't a thing when I had been in Morocco, I just thought it was so interesting that I had, unintentionally created this image of myself masked and covered. So then I made this version, which is the same pose, but instead of the Coca-Cola, it has the logo of Dove, which is like hand sanitizer and cleansing. So that's what that one is. And then out of all of these, because the subject matter was so heavy, I wanted to sort of bring lightness back into it because there were still good things happening and I was enjoying being home, and I didn't want to create work that was just so completely heavy. So I created this animation, and there are sound effects, so give me 1 second. So that's not the full thing, but I'm going to turn it back down. But if you'd like to watch the whole piece, it's available on my website and will also be linked with my virtual tour. So, but the whole thing is using sound effects that I've created, which is also sort of my way of working sound into my art because I'm as much a singer as I am an artist. I'm a member of the Davidson College Chorale, and I was until recently the president of After Hours, which is the vocal jazz group. So got some sound in here as well. So then that was sort of the end of that spring semester. And then fall semester, senior year, COVID semester. We're here and I'm here with all of my friends, but it was really such a hard time. Like, you're here in this community where all of your people are 10 feet away from you, but you can't see any of them. And classes were all online, and that was very frustrating. I mean, we're all living it, so we're all on the same deal. But this was sort of the end of the semester, my feeling about having lived this whole semester. I think it says a lot about COVID, and I think it's sort of a unanimous feeling. So if you feel that way, I hope this piece does something for you. So that was the end of last semester. And then I entered into this semester, and I have made it this far in my college career without having completed my team sport until today, because I sent the email to Sandy Helfgott. So thank you, Sandy, for accepting my yoga. I did not get to do golf, which is what I had wanted to do, but that's okay. I emailed him, I said, Sandy, I got my golf shoes, I got my golf outfit, I'm so ready, I got my fashion. And he's like, no, you can't do that. So whatever, Sandy, I made a painting about it, and that's okay. So I started this one at the beginning of the semester, and this one was one that I sort of just kept coming back to and adding different patterns and figures as I went along. And also things that I can't actually own. So like, I love these shoes. I found them in a store, but they're like $1 billion. So instead of owning them, now I own them here, haha, in my painting. And just adding different generations of patterns. So this is sort of more 60s and 70s era. And some of it is clothing that I own as well. But this also, I was thinking a lot about my connection to Alice in Wonderland and how that is just a story that I've loved through my whole life. And how it's sort of this whimsical world, this other world that you enter into, and how she learns through her adventures is similar to how Lalo and Lalo Land existed. But we have like the birds playing golf, like how they do in Alice in Wonderland as well. So that is that one. And sort of going along with birds, but also in connection to the other masked piece over there, I created this piece. And I was thinking a lot about how I could kind of riff off of that one in facial expression and emotion, but also how I could flip the landscape, because so much of right now is sort of inside, but we are able to go outside more now. And I've appreciated nature so much more recently, as when I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So when I was in the city over the summer, being able to go to different parks and we walked around a cemetery a lot, and like being out in nature among all these birds, I sort of gained more of an appreciation for that, but also how our world is sort of upside down right now. The birds and forest area are on the bottom, whereas this more underwater landscape is on top. And also I like drawing birds, and I got to draw a lot of birds in this one. So, and that leads me to these bird sculptures, which you've probably been seeing around this whole time. But these were actually made sophomore year and sort of the beginning of me using birds in my work while at Davidson. And I've been thinking a lot about how bird is a word that is used to describe women, and it's not always a good term, but I just think, you know, flamboyancy and just how beautiful and expressive birds can be just goes along very well with the patterns and colors and figures in my painted pieces. And these are also just very funny to me. This, like, they're grumpy and they have a lot of different emotion. But so that's what these sculptural pieces are. And so we have these two here, and each of them is looking at one of the two bird pieces. And then there are these three, which ball X. So they're kind of facing this painting with the golf, and they're wondering how these golf balls ended up here and why they're how this girl ended up hitting the golf balls onto their nest over here. And then we have this third one who is looking at this last set of pieces that I'll show you. Thank you for scooting around. Yeah, he's kind of silly. He's my silly one. So I like him a lot, but these are the most recent. So the titles of them are Cross, Chris, and Covade. This first one is, again, sort of my most recent feelings about religion and music. So much of my connection to religion is through music. I was raised sort of culturally Jewish, so I know a lot of the songs, but I definitely know more about Episcopalianism than I know about Judaism. But music is a way that I connect to both. And as I've been in choirs my whole life, but choir is sort of up in the air right now. This is how I feel about that. So she's looking to the side to try to hear the music, but instead this religious aspect is being decayed from the edge over there that she's looking at. And she's sitting in prayer, but sort of distracted from that focus. And then the second one is a lot of how my year of people is feeling right now. We're entering into a new time in our lives. So we all have our fingers crossed and everything else crossed to hope that something good will happen. But at the same time, the cross is forming this X that you don't know what's going to happen. And she's floating in undetermined landscape. And so even though there's some areas that are defined, her landscape is sort of out of control or out of knowledge. And then this final piece is called COVID, combination of COVID and AIDS, because I've been thinking a lot recently about how my parents were in their 20s when AIDS was really prevalent, but how now that I'm in my 20s, COVID and this new disease is rampant and still very prevalent. So this girl is sitting in this water. That's how water renews itself throughout history and is continuing in these cycles. And also how she has this sort of loop of her arms and how history kind of goes in a circle as well, but how we all have to work together and how you have to support yourself through these social and political issues. And the three stripes are covering what is COVID with the masking, but also her chest and the lower part of her body as well, which is a reference to the protection in both COVID and AIDS. And her head and elbows are also in the shape of the triangle that was used on the logo for Silence Equals Death. It was originally used in the Holocaust as a symbol to mark homosexuals, but then became more of this power symbol. So she is in the shape of the triangle there and has these three pink stripes, which were the color of that triangle. So I know that's kind of a heavy note to end on, but that is what I've been thinking about the most recently. And still, this is probably the best way in this moment of me trying to interpret my place in the world right now. And because my perspective is the only one that I know and can speak to the most fluently, that's why I use myself in these pieces. But my hope is that through the familiarity of these figures and through the sort of worldly essence of these topics, that you can connect them as well. So thank you so much. And I'd love to take questions if you have any. And thank you for being here.
Awesome, Joy. Thank you so much. Well, we did get a couple of questions. Can you talk a little bit more about like your process, your materials, how long it takes you to complete a piece? Yeah, just like walk us through your process a little bit.
Yeah, so I use acrylic paint because I work really quickly, and acrylic dries quicker. It's water-based. And with those, I use also acrylic paint pens because I've always really loved drawing. And so being able to draw, but use the colors of paint and sort of work with the painterly aspect of the pens as well helps me a lot in creating detail, but also fading different areas out. And so I bring attention to some things through the paint pens and sort of mute other areas with the paint. And sometimes I make my own canvases. These were not all made by me, but I do work very quickly because in fact, I made these two this week. So if that gives you a sense of that, yeah, that's how it is. But other pieces take me a longer time, like the one with the golf girl and the flamingos I've worked on throughout the semester. But then it was crunch time, so had to get stuff done. And here we are. So I hope that's helpful. I can elaborate more if you want. But.
Awesome, thank you. You're getting a ton of love and praise in the chat.
Oh my God, I love you all.
Next question.
Thank you.
An interesting one. You talked a little bit about going from abroad and an extremely brief semester at Davidson and then home for quarantine. So somebody wants to know, what are the trade-offs that you experience as artists in a novel or in a novel environment like abroad compared to the more kind of quiet, contained environment like quarantine, and
Wow.
in your art? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was abroad, so the pieces that I made when I was in Morocco, in the first 2 months that I was there, I was at a homestay and I didn't have access to these materials. I had my paint pens with me, but the whole time that I was there, I was making sketches, preparing for the pieces that I had made in my last month there. So that was very different from what I ended up doing with COVID, where all of these ideas were coming to me at once. And once a week, I just pumped out these pieces because I had learned in Morocco how to say something with my pattern and expression. And so I knew that skill. But because I had so many thoughts about what was happening around me, I was able to make those much more quickly. Yeah. And I had to work much smaller scale because I was in my house versus in the studio space with lots of artists kind of contributing all at the same time. So,
yeah. Can you talk about, clearly the bulk of the work is painting. Can you talk a little bit more, you talked about this a little bit, but like working in multiple disciplines, or especially in the disciplines of digital art and sculpture as we see here, and how that changed, and strengthened, affected your artistic practice, and what you felt like you learned from that?
Yeah, so I've always painted and drawn. When I was in preschool, the way that we decided where I went to preschool was because my mom was talking to one of the teachers and she came back and I was laying in the finger paint table. So we knew I was gonna be a painter. And then I drew on the car, I drew on the table. So painting and drawing has been a consistent part of my life. So I already kind of came into Davidson some element of that skill set. But also here, the facilities, digital art and sculpture are absolutely incredible. And because I could take sort of range of classes, I wanted to experiment with those medias as well, and working with these ideas. So with the digital work, I made that animation at home and when I had been in Joelle's digital art class. And I had just watched the Yellow Submarine movie with my family. We watched a lot of stuff all together, so that sort of worked its way into my work as well. But the animation of that and just Monty Python, sort of those more natural sort of drawn elements that aren't as high tech, I really enjoy because I don't consider myself a technologically advanced person. And I wanted to sort of exemplify that in these works. And I've always really enjoyed sort of older ways of creating things. And even though it's actually very simple movements across each piece. And then with the sculptural work, I just really enjoyed working with the bronze casting. So we use the lost wax method here, and that's a lot like it's similar to using clay in that if you melt wax, you can mold it like clay. I had worked with clay a little bit before, but I really enjoyed experimenting with wax and just the way I could use that as well. So I'm always having fun playing around with different materials. But that's a little bit about those two things. So.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about your experience living in a sustainability house. Somebody would like to know, how do you think about like sustainability and environmentalism, and does that play a role in your art and how you create your art?
Yeah. So I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So I'm a true city kid, I would say. But definitely coming here to Davidson and being like among all this nature. At first being here, it was ridiculous. Like there's all these bird sounds all the time. Like there's insects, like I can't fall asleep. It was ridiculous. Squirrels running all over the place. And nature just did not agree with me. But we're like getting to know each other a little bit more now. So I definitely came to appreciate nature more in being here, but also really enjoyed getting to go home and be back in my city environment. But I think those landscapes have certainly started to work their way more in because with the first one that I showed you, what the city aspect is, it's all these people and fashion and patterns all colliding all at the same time. Whereas now that I've lived here for 4 years and surrounded by these beautiful landscapes, those scenes, and because I work my environment in, have made their way to the forefront.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Jill is asking, she says she has a piece of yours.
Yeah. Hi, Jill.
Would be interested in having you explain that piece and your inspiration in painting it, and then kind of talk to us about how you've grown as an artist since then, and any thoughts.
Yeah, so the piece, hi Jill, the piece that I made for you was made in, I think, intro basic painting here. So we were experimenting a lot with different usage of paint and paint application. So it's a lot of sort of thicker application. We use spray paint and water, and not necessarily looking at a particular subject, but learning how to use different color combinations. And that was 2 overlaid photographs. So it created this sort of abstract, more collaged image. And so as I developed in that painting more of these thicker paint applications and how to work more with composition, I went back into figures, which have always been relevant in my artistic practice. So that's what a lot of these pieces are. So the one that you have was actually made before all of these. So that's why that one's a little bit different. But yeah.
Great. Yeah. Another question. This person was interested in you talking about your correlation between religion and light in your art, and was interested if you could talk more about like how you approach or what you think about like the symbolism of the colors that you use, and that kind of, the interplay between light and darkness and color, and that symbolization in your work. Yeah,
so actually this is a good place for us to focus, because I did talk about the light in the one from Morocco, but this piece, especially with the relation to religion, because I'm sort of in this darker mindset of it right now, and that light of religion is turned off, this piece is much darker than that one. And yeah, so purple is my favorite color. So this is a good way to get color into it. You know, like when you're 5 or 6 years old, like your favorite color really defines you. So purple is my favorite color. So I decided, because yellow was the opposite, I was going to have nothing to do with yellow. But that came back to bite me, because all of my pieces. And the other color that's in everything is pink. And my mom, sorry mom, you didn't want me to be a pink girl. I wasn't allowed to wear pink at all when I was little, but oops, it made its way back in. So it is now. And yeah, so pink, purple, yellow all sort of end up making their way back in. But definitely the darkness and the light of each of them. Important, but also using these more playful, childlike colors and trying to keep that lightness in these sort of darker themes, I think, and having that contrast is really important to my work.
Awesome. Yeah. Then going off of that, can you just talk to us a little bit more about like your interest in fashion, and how you mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but yeah, how you got into that, how that plays into your interest in art, and how, kind of going off the color conversation,
yes.
how you think about the patterns and the fabric in the work.
Yes, so this is a whole conversation, but grew up in New York. I went to art school. Everyone thrifts everything. It was a whole competition to see who could wear the crazier thing. So that definitely had a lot to play with it. But also, when I was in high school, my mom started working for Calvin Klein. And then through that, in the archive. So I would leave school where there's all these crazy clothes, get on the subway, go to 39th Street, the fashion district, and be then surrounded by the fashion there, and go into this archive, which is not just Calvin Klein and PVH clothing, but also pieces that they've used to inspire the designs of their other clothing, and also looking at all of these fashion advertisements and all that goes into the fashion world as well. So much of that, and including the pose, works its way into my pieces, and just how that was such a part of my childhood. But also my main activity at home is like, we get coffee, and then we go and thrift. Like, that is what we do. So that's just always been a part of what I do. And I also really like dressing up, and my pieces like dressing up. So there we go.
Awesome. We have a question from somebody asking, when did you know that you wanted to major in art and go to Davidson?
I came to Davidson knowing I wanted to major in art. So I applied to art school and to liberal arts school. But I was told at one of the art schools that the students in undergrad who had gone to liberal art, or in grad school who had gone to liberal arts for undergrad had a lot more to say in their work because classes and had different discussions, whereas the undergrad students were more like very skillfully talented, but couldn't work as many ideas into their pieces. So I was very interested in going to liberal arts school and sort of gaining more of that worldly understanding. But then also when anyone who's toured Davidson knows, you start at the admissions building, they take you to the back, and then they show you the studios. And I was like, we're good, we're sold. Now I'm here. And I think I declared freshman spring. So I've been in it for the whole time. And it's my only major. So I've been, yeah.
Awesome. We're getting some comments about some of people's favorite of your art pieces, your Halloween costume in 2017 at Davidson, which I remember. Very iconic. So on that note, could you talk a little bit more? You talked about this with the sculptures, but like your interest in birds and how you think of them as like an icon and a motif in your art, kind of when that started for you.
Well, probably, so I made a peacock collage in high school. It was part of my choir camp, and they had peacocks just roaming around there. And also, we used to go to St. John the Divine, which is uptown, a lot, and they have white peacocks roaming around there. And I just think peacocks are so beautiful. And also just how, they're really fancy and dressed up, and that is kind of how I am fancy and dressed up. Sorry, my mic keeps moving. And so that's probably how birds started working their way in. But I've also always really been interested in like passenger pigeons and pigeons just wandering around New York as well. And so, yeah, freshman year, we got to get more people dressing up. If there's any underclassmen out there, please dress up for Halloween. We got to get it out there. But my freshman year, I went as a peacock. And since then, I've gone as different animals. So sophomore year, I went as a lizard. In Morocco, I was a zebra, but didn't really mean anything to anyone. I was just walking around looking wacky. And then this last year, I was a cheetah. Please dress up for Halloween. That's my moment to say that. I hope you do. It's a lot of fun. And it's not just for kids, it's for all ages of kids.
Awesome. And another question about your style. Can you talk a little bit about, especially I think this is a good question for what you're in front of, kind of the interaction of the more geometric forms and the organic forms that kind of seems to be, the geometric forms certainly seem to come out more in these three paintings, and maybe your earlier ones being a little bit more organic. So yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that came a lot out of studying different paint applications here, but also being able to use the paint pen. And I really enjoy the contrast of these sort of more mixed areas, but to tighten up that detail with these more geometric forms. I'm also really interested in math. I haven't majored or minored in it or anything, but I've really enjoyed it throughout my life, and geometry and how all these pieces can come together. There was this series of books when I was little called The Calder Game, Chasing Vermeer and the Right Three, and it was these three kids. It's by Blue Ballier, and they all solved these mysteries through using these things called pentominoes, which are upstairs. And I just loved the idea of being able to use that code and those geometric forms to tell a story. So that's a lot where these more geometric forms come from, in contrast to those more abstracted areas.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah.
Lots more praise and love in the chat. A couple people are interested to know what are you thinking of as next step with your art, with your artistic practice and your expression? You know, where do you think you have to go?
Yeah, so my next step sort of goes an earlier step, that I am also a children's book illustrator. My senior year of high school, I illustrated a children's book called That Baby in the Manger. And then my sophomore fall, I contributed illustrations to a book called Holy Troublemakers and Unconventional Saints. And so my next step is that I am in contact with those publishers still, but I have had interest in, people have been interested in me continuing to illustrate, which is very nice. Thank you for your interest in that. But so that is sort of my idea of my next step in art. Other than that, I'm definitely going to keep painting. Just what I do. I've taken many showers since I finished these ones this week. I still have paint on this arm. It's on my knee. I don't know. I'm just always be covered in paint and drawing. So if you want one, let me know. I take commissions. There we go.
Awesome. I think Katie just asked me if she could ask a question. I don't know, Katie, if you wanted to do that directly or send it to me.
I would love to ask a question if it's all right with you, Cole.
Of course.
All right. Hey, Chloe.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, after listening to your talk and hearing you explain so beautifully the kind of evolution of how your paintings came to be and how you think about them and how you process through them, I started thinking about what you've learned over the years about what you need to surround yourself with in order to make really rich, dynamic work, and how you are going to take that forward in the years to come.
Yeah. So I've discovered that I need to have color and pattern everywhere in this room because there's so much white space and my life has no white space. My apartment, thank you to my apartment for dealing with all of my colors and pattern, because it's just kind of what I have, but most of our house is color and pattern. So I appreciate you putting up with that. But my studio upstairs has paint everywhere. So having that studio space has been really important to me, to just sort of be able to spread out and have all of these pieces of fabric and things everywhere there as well. But also being surrounded by people that I can really connect to, especially as everyone has all these different majors here, sort of hearing things into my art as well.
Chloe, sorry to interrupt. Your mic has cut out. Could you repeat the last two sentences, please?
So, sorry. How everyone I've worked with here over the past 4 years, like students, and how I've had these incredible conversations with everyone who have been in these different majors, and getting to talk to them and work those ideas into my pieces as well. So I'm very forward. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, those are all of the questions, I think.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. And if you're in Davidson and would like a private tour in the next few weeks, I have 24/7 access. I'll walk you around. I'll tell you more stories. You just let me know. I can also FaceTime you. So just let me know. I'm here. I live in this building, so I'll be around. But cool. Thank you all. I love you. Hi. Oh my God. Oh, that's okay. Hello, hello, hello.